Hello students. Yes, so far we have completed with different marketable securities or the avenues which are available in the prevailing Indian market. So now we shall understand one of the important topics from your exam viewpoint. What are the types of risk? So far we have covered what is a risk is all about, what's the definition, what are the features that is associated with the concept called a risk. Now we will get into the main part, that is types of risk. See, here you have two types of risk mainly, that is first one is a systematic risk, another one is unsystematic risk. Now what does systematic risk communicate? See, systematic risk, you know, it refers to the risk which is inherent, to the entire market or the market segment, where systematic risk is also called as, undiversifiable risk, uncontrollable, which is volatile. Volatile is there is lots of fluctuations in the economy. Say for example, it can be in terms of price movements, that is inflation, deflation. There's a market risk that which affects the overall market, and it not just about a particular stock or particular industry. It is not just confined to one particular sector. It is something, systematic risk is something which is uncontrollable, where it is always associated with the market risk, with the interest rate factor, with the purchasing power risk, right? So this type of risk, it is both unpredictable and impossible to completely avoid. It cannot be even mitigated. That is, mitigate is to hedge, mitigate is to minimize, right? See, when it comes to the unsystematic, it is something that which speaks about, where it is confined with the business risk, where something is happening internally, things are in your hand, you can take an action to overcome that risk. You would have come up with the proper measures that would yield you in order to achieve that particular position. But under systematic risk, but when it comes to the systematic risk, which is something, it affects the overall market, and it cannot be minimized or mitigated in terms of having the diversification in terms of risk, and only through hedging or by using the correct asset allocation strategy as well. So systematic risk is something which is inherent to the market as a whole, which is going to reflect the impact of economic, there's a kind of a geopolitical and financial factors. This particular kind, systematic risk, it is distinguished from unsystematic risk, which is going to have an impact on a specific industry or the security as such, where this particular risk, it is largely unpredictable. See, can you, if given a chance, if I tell you what would be the interest rate, what would be the market risk, can you gauge it? It's not possible. This is something out of your hands. This is something which is caused by the external environment, isn't it? So therefore, unsystematic risk, that is a systematic risk, it is a largely unpredictable. But on the other side, unsystematic, it is of course a predictable. And the systematic risk, they are generally viewed as being difficult to avoid. They are very difficult to avoid. You will have to bear, you in the sense the investors have to bear these kind of risks, which is associated with a market, interest rates, a purchasing power, right? So the investors, they can somewhat mitigate the impact of systematic risk, by building a diversifiable portfolio. Now, what is this understanding of a systematic risk is all about? See, systematic risk, it underlies the other investment risks, such as you have industry risk. If an investor, he has placed too much of emphasis on the security stocks, for example, it is possible to diversify, to invest in a range of stocks in other sectors, such as you have healthcare, you have infrastructure. However, the systematic risk, it is going to incorporate the interest rate changes, isn't it? There are inflation, deflation, recessions, the downturns, any kind of wars, and any other major changes that would bring in. And the shifts in the domains can also, affect the entire market, and cannot be mitigated or minimized by changing the positions, within a portfolio of public equities. Here what happens, to help, in order to manage the systematic risk and all, see, investors should ensure, that their portfolios include a variety of asset classes, such as a fixed income, a cash, real estate, right? Like each of which, it is going to react differently in an event of a major systematic change, and always, an increase in the interest rates. For example, it is going to make some, new issue of bonds which is more valuable. It is going to cause some company the stocks to decrease in the prices, as investors, they perceive the executive teams, to be cutting back on spending. So in the event of an interest rate rise, ensuring, the portfolio incorporates an ample income generating securities, and that is going to mitigate the loss of, the value with some particular equity. So what you will have to understand now, systematic is something, which can be thought as a probability of loss, which is associated with the entire market or a segment. On the other hand, unsystematic is something, the probability of loss within a specific industry or security, which you can, likewise you can mitigate with that, right? So that's how the things are going to work under the particular concept called as a systematic risk. So what you have to understand is that which is, that which concentrates on market risk, that which concentrates on interest risks, and that which is going to concentrate on purchasing power risk. So basically, systematic risk is all about, the risk which is being inherent, to the entire market or the market segment, and that which is, it is undiversifiable, you can't actually mitigate, you can't, which is of, the volatility, and because of, the market risk, it is going to affect the entire market. So always this kind of, this particular, kind of a risk, it is said to be volatile in nature. You never know how things are going to work over here. So some of the examples, if I have to quote, it can be changes in the laws, where the government is going to give, and what are the changes in the tax reforms, the interest rate hikes, and, the natural disasters, yes, and any kind of changes in the foreign policies can also lead to this kind of risk, and the currency value changes, right? And the mainly the natural disasters, any kind of failures of the banks, in case of Punjab National Bank itself, you can see, right? And the economic recessions as well. So all these can lead to, a systematic, right? So if you ask me, like, is systematic risk diversifiable, right? See, events like inflation or a war, inflation is where there will be an increase in the prices. It is going to, fluctuate the interest rates influence also. When it happens, it is going to influence the entire economy and not just a specific firm or industry. Whereas, under systematic, diversification cannot eliminate the risk of facing all these events, and, this is considered to be undiversifiable risk. That's the reason why it is said to be the systematic risk or the market risk. So if you ask me, ma'am, how it can be, calculated, see, in order to calculate the systematic risk, we have something called as a beta. So beta, it is going to, it is a calculation where systematic risk can be used or measured using a beta method. What is now beta? See, stock beta in the measure of a risk, it talks about how the risk is associated with an individual stock in comparison to the market as a whole. So it discusses about that. And here, beta is the sensitivity of the stocks returns, to some index returns, right? So beta, it is calculated using the correlation of the the regression analysis. So to sum up with this particular concept, what you all have to understand about systematic risk is that a systematic risk, which is it is caused by the macroeconomic factors within an economy. It can be related to market, it can be related to the interest rate, purchasing power, right? So systematic is something risk that which includes, all the unforeseen events that is going to occur in everyday life, and which are, beyond the control of the investors who have invested in different portfolios. And The only way, to avoid this risk is to avoid investing in any kind of a risky investment. However, in this world, this is not possible, because only the T-bills, that is treasury bills, certificate of deposits of government is backed institutions, right? It would be options available for investment. So this is why every investor, they accept the systematic risk, as an integral part of their investment strategy. So that's how the things are going to work under, systematic, where systematic risk is something which is caused by the macroeconomic, that is external factors, within an economy, and they are beyond the control of investors or the companies, financial institutions which have got into that particular investment. And this risk is going to cause a fluctuation, the volatility in terms of returns that which is earned from the risky investments. So this is all about the concept of one of the major types of risk, that is a systematic risk.